Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for braving the rainstorm and coming tonight for this fabulous lineup. So the way it's going to work is I'm going to introduce everyone together, and then Jennica will read first, Marita will read second, Liz will read third, and Amber Dawn will finish. And then we'll have a short break, and then we will have a panel discussion in which we will talk about many things, including sex. So you should be sure to stay for that. So Jennica Harper's most recent book of poetry is Wood, published by Anvil in 2013. Her previous books are What It Feels Like for a Girl and The Octopus and Other Poems. She also has poems forthcoming in the anthologies I Found It at the Movies with Guernica Editions and Mess, the hospital anthology, Tightrope Books. Jenica's long poem Liner Notes, which is included in Wood, won a Silver National Magazine Award, and her poems have twice been selected for Vancouver's Poetry in Transit program. Jennica lives in Vancouver, where she also writes for television. Marita Dachsel is the author of Glossolalia, Eliza Roxy Snow, and Things Said and Done. Her poetry has been shortlisted for the Robert Croach Award for Innovative Poetry and the Relit Prize, and has appeared in many literary journals and anthologies, including Best Canadian Poetry in English, 2011. Her play, Initiation Trilogy, was produced by Electric Company Theatre and was featured at the 2012 Vancouver International Writers Festival and was nominated for the Jesse Richardson Award for Outstanding New Script. She is the artist in residence at UVic Centre for Studies in Religion and Society. After many years in Vancouver and Edmonton, she and her family now live in Victoria. Elizabeth Bachinsky is a person I know well. She's the author of 5 collections of poetry: Curio, Home of Sudden Service, God of Misconnections, I Don't Feel So Good, and The Hottest Summer in Recorded History. Her poetry has been nominated for awards including the Pat Lowther Award, the Kobzar Literary Award, the George Ryga Award for Social Awareness in Literature, the Governor General's Award for Poetry, and the Bronwen Wallace Award. And her work has appeared in literary lots of literary journals, anthologies, and on film around the world. She was born in Regina, raised in Prince George and Maple Ridge, BC, and now lives in Vancouver, where she teaches creative writing and edits Event magazine. And finally, Amber Dawn is a writer from Vancouver. Here she is in Vancouver. She's the author of the Lambda Award-winning novel Sub Rosa and editor of the anthologies Fist of the Spider Women, Fear and Queer Desire, and With a Rough Tongue, Femmes Write Porn. Amber Dawn was the 2012 winner of the Writers' Trust of Canada Dane Ogilvy Prize for LGBT writers. She currently teaches speculative fiction writing at Douglas College. So I'd like to welcome Jennica.
Thank you so much, Jillian, and I know I'm not alone when I say I'm very excited to be reading and talking alongside these other women because we're kind of all huge fans of each other, so it's pretty exciting for us to be in the same place at the same time having conversations, so hopefully that will translate to you. So Wood is a collection of a few different series of poems, so there are some long poems and some series of poems, and they are loosely thematically connected through the idea of parents and children. So children looking up at a parent looking back down at a child, and how we all disappoint each other. I haven't read from it a whole lot, so I'm going to read a few things that I haven't been reading much out loud yet. So I'm going to read a few poems from a section called Papa Hotel. My father as Jack Nicholson. A man who knows a pretty girl when he sees one, and he's always seeing one. He reads waitresses' tags, calls them their names, all down-home daddy drawl. When he was young, this probably worked with some. Now they humor him. For some reason, I want them to be spellbound, charmed, hot, as they listen to what he does and does not want. As Robert Redford. Not the brilliant reporter, the baseball player. The underdog who did it his own way, who made that bat out of his own goddamn wood and won. This man is a golden boy, parade-worthy. But after, nothing feels real. He'll have indigestion, insomnia. He'll stare at the bat, having no memory of making it. Get up in the middle of the night and just drive, not knowing what made him go. This man will take in his hand a whole clump of tinsel and throw it at the Christmas tree, letting it go where it wants, letting it land where it lands. As Kevin Costner, Redford's evil baseball-playing twin. The one who sweats too much and likes to fuck and keeps on fucking until his children are old enough to understand and then still keeps on, perhaps more so. The man who sings both, "Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys," and "Thank God I'm a country boy." This man is not a team player. He's the rule breaker who eventually loses it all, who can't take the heat so he burns down the kitchen. The man who's made up of a billion tiny anger cells erupting constantly. The man who gave me those chains, those loops and numbers that flare in me, red and white and hot, when I think of him. I'm going to read a poem called Cloud Sisters, which is not quite so angry. Cloud Sisters. 1. Growth capacity. Some days we look the same, depending on our hair. Blunt cut under the ears, dirty blonde, the dye gone. We are older now, have filled our skins, have filled our lives with others' lives and living. Metabolism. Life's a process that goes on without you noticing. Thank our chemicals. Why I call or do not call always comes down to energy. If I were better, I would save up more for you. I burn it, not even knowing where it goes. Reproduction. Have you noticed it's not just us in the room now? The pink-cheeked child is yours, but could be mine. Our parents are siblings and are so unalike. They seem like strangers. What are we? Adaptation to environment. We are cloud sisters. We pass, move, blow, cover. The anaphase surprised us, but we're recovering well. I think about you even when I don't call. The sky's batting keeps us together, full of each other, woven the same. And I'm going to read a few poems from a section called the Sally Draper Poems. And some of you I saw earlier in the week. Thank you for being at both events. If you know Mad Men and you know Sally Draper, there will be a certain resonance here, I think. But if you don't, if you're not familiar with Mad Men, this is not intended to be an exclusive thing. You can just think about any girl, and you'll be with me. Sally Draper at the premiere of Jaws. I recognize that beach. Something about it, even in the dark. Hey, Martha's Vineyard. Shh. Jeez. I whisper to him, we used to go there in summer. He rolls his eyes. We're under the surface now, with the girl. She has pretty legs, like a dancer. They hired that girl just for her legs. He looks at me, pleading. Sorry. She treads water. I suck in my stomach. The cold water's just making me colder. They sure did crank the AC to the point I barely remember that it's June. They made it cold in here so we'd cuddle up to our boys. This is me flirting. I know I'm doomed. He doesn't look at me, I guess to not encourage more talking. The sound kicks in, and I jump a little. Da-da, da-da, da-da. I recognize it as a tuba from the years Bobby practiced in the basement, stuck with that fat thing after being out sick the day instruments were picked. I take it in, know the notes. E, F, E, F, E, F, E, F. I don't turn to him, don't tell him about the tuba. Now that I'm quiet, he takes my hand, rubs it between his to warm me up. I know it's supposed to be scary, but they won't let this girl be hurt. They can't. Sally Draper's first kiss. I knew kissing a boy would be different when it wasn't your brother. I just couldn't imagine how. I'd turned my hand into a mouth like Senior Wences, but didn't let him talk. Brought my hand close, really slowly, shut my eyes most of the way, keeping them open just a slit so I could see, too. Tasted the salt on my fingers. Tried to imagine what the whole of my hand was tasting. I'd stuck my tongue in, but there was nothing there, just air. When finally I made James stay still so I could kiss him, I knew what had been missing. Resistance. I slipped my tongue through his teeth, happy he put up a fight. The kiss made me want to pee, and it made me want to kiss him again. Then James wanted to keep going, and I got distracted by the TV. Now, whenever I see a ventriloquist, or puppets, Pinocchio, any wooden boy, boy on a string, boy with a hand inside him, I have to excuse myself. Sally Draper struggles to buy a Christmas gift. He's got no hobbies, doesn't fish or golf like other men. He's not cultured, wouldn't care about opera tickets or the new Neil Diamond. A magazine subscription's out, of course, the ads. He might wear a tie, but I can't bear to buy him something so dull. So I choose the spy who came in from the cold. Maybe he'll see the symbolism, a man wanting out, hope, the girl. And if not, maybe he'll at least wonder, why this book? What does it mean? And he'll realize I'm interesting. Sally Draper buys red lipstick. The woman at Marshall's lines my lips first with brick, as in shida. I make an O. Next comes the stick. Dare you. I want to say, you win. I'll buy you, but you'll just languish in a drawer with hellbent and taboo. All my life, I have shied from these lips. His lips. Bowed and smacking of blow-up doll. Ode to an O. But today, I'll wear red. The red of a cherry on a sword in a virgin cocktail I'll have to sip through a straw. Thank you very much. And thank you to Am and SFU for putting this whole evening together. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi. Is this one on? Thank you. I'm going to do something that we don't get to do very often, and we're going to do a duet of the non-singing variety for now. It's a poem I wrote for two voices, for a pair of sisters, and so I usually don't read it, but here we go. It's Maria and Sarah Lawrence. They were a set of sisters who were both married to Joseph Smith, and I'll be talking about him in just a moment. I am a woman.
My sister is just a kid.
Thinks I'm just a kid.
She won't let me have my own life. We share everything. First as children, dresses, shoes, bonnets, books, a dollhouse,
rocking horse, rolling hoop.
Papa's affection.
Mama's attention.
Then Papa's inheritance. Even Emma can't tell us apart.
Keeps us together.
Allowing Joseph to marry us both. She's not stupid.
She's so stupid.
Thanks to that lusty sum, first we're adopted and then betrothed. Now we share his fears of death,
his freshly shaved neck, his peachy lobe,
his childhood memories,
his muscled thigh,
his uncomfortable dreams.
My sister is jealous of me.
I'm the one named.
She's the one named.
In his arrest warrant. I'm the one who
won't
be remembered.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for coming out on a rainy, rainy night. And thank you, all these wonderful women, for agreeing to be part of this. I'm really excited. I'm going to be reading from Glossolalia, which is a series of poems told from the points of view of the polygamous wives of Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church. You just heard a pair of sisters. I'm going to start with Elizabeth Davis Goldsmith Brackenbury Durfee. I guess one thing you should know is that he married the lowball. We don't know how many women he married. The lowball number that I'm working with is 34. And he married most of those women within a 2-year period, just leading up to his death. And that's all you need to know now. Blackmail is an ugly word. I don't like it. And it wasn't really blackmail. No. I'd say it was more an expression of knowledge, of consequences, the bigger picture. We had an agreement. I wouldn't tell his wife as long as he made me his, and I helped recruit. No, wait, that's too strong. Persuade? Yeah, persuade some of the younger girls. Don't look at me that way. I am proud of what I did. A woman of my age, my status, anyone would have done the same. Foolish not to. Delsina Johnson Sherman. His floods, his tornadoes, plagues, drought, over nothing. It's never personal. A cracked bowl. Torn pants, dropped food, smeared shit, 5 crisp crescents on a chubby thigh, a taut hairbrush, a smothering embrace, a clumsy constellation from rough diaper pins. A mother has only so much patience, so much time to clean and care for goodly work, God knows. I forgive his outbursts of destruction and damage. I understand prayers ignored, cried out in a cold night, needing to suckle, desperate in faith. So in Joseph's collection of wives, he married women from the upper range was 58, was the oldest woman he married, and the youngest was 14. And I'm going to read a girl who was 17. Sarah Ann Whitney. Here's one. What does a bride wear at her pretend marriage to her uncle? I know, a classic question, right? One for the ages. I blame my mother. She's been way too involved from day one. Even before day one, arranging with glee my marriage to Joe, standing proud on our wedding day like some overzealous stage mother. I'm the first to have our mother at the so-called secret ceremony. How embarrassing. He's had a pretty busy time these last few months, hiding everywhere from Montrose to Warsaw. The mobs really have it in for him. But my mother, she won't let the mob stand in the way of her daughter. No way. Escorted me all over Illinois so I could comfort him. Then she started with the math. Tallies and graphs and charts. Figures I should be with child by now. With child? I'm still in school, for crying out loud. But she doesn't want to be a grandmother. Not really. Not yet. She's miffed that I don't have the status she thinks but really she deserves. Thinks if I'm the first of his wives to have his spawn, I'll suddenly have rank. She knows Miss Snow and the Partridge Girls are married and in his house. Wants me to have the same. No thanks. It's not working out for her at all. Last time we saw him, she ever so slightly implied that maybe Perhaps I might be in a delicate way. Unbelievable. I denied it, of course. Who lies to a prophet? My mother, that's who. Joseph's unnerved and made some arrangements. So now I'm about to be married off to my uncle Joseph. Yeah, another Joseph. How many Josephs can one girl handle? My dad's sister passed away 6 months ago, and now I'm taking her place. Ugh. He's already promised that all this is fake, that there won't be any comforting going on. I don't care. It's all so gross. But at least I'll be out of my mother's house. Now that's a silver lining. I'm going to end with Emma Hale Smith. And Emma was Joseph's first wife, the only one, obviously. He married monogamously. And she fought against not poetry. I don't know that, actually. I can't say for sure. Maybe she did. She fought against polygamy her whole life. And she married him in 1827, and he started the church in 1830. So when she married him, she had no idea what she was getting into. But she stayed by his side throughout. There's 4 sections. Each section starts with a phrase, a few lines that are attributed to her, either in her writing or what someone else at the time recorded her to say. And I'll hopefully read this so you can tell the difference. But I won't be doing funny voices. Emma Hale Smith, 1. I had no intention of marrying when I left home. Preferring to marry him to any other man I knew, I consented. Our thighs pressed into each other as the wagon hiccuped across the border. Twice asked, twice my father rejected consent, disowned. I regret nothing. I am your sacrament. Sip me. I am your wine. You used to say I looked beautiful pregnant. It was true. But my babies were buried at a rate I considered laboring squatted over a muddy hole. Words shouldn't need context, but there is a grander world in everything. That watch, this broom, laundry hung to dry. How can a lifetime fill a page? 2. I believe he was everything he professed to be. I believed. Joseph, you were everything I believed, I profess. You believed everything, you professed everything, I believed you, until I couldn't. I confess. I lose you. I lose you, my life over. I lost you. How old am I now? Can you tell by my voice, my hands, the way I sigh? A person does not lose faith. It is not a hairpin or a tooth. Faith evolves, salvaged. A grove becomes a house. A fire becomes ashes. What will be my last thought, my last words? Will I call to you? 3. I did not ask for this life, but accept it as my calling. I have watched you dance, ignored how close your lips, how firm your palms, where your fingers, ignored them all. Salacious whispers carry far. How can one woman create such change? How can one man? You stalked home, witching hour, stinking, their perfumed sex soiling our bed. Melancholy marrow, too much silent. My heart is as ripe as yours. What I know? Not all eggshells are fragile. Not all twigs snap. 4. My husband was my crown. I mother 4 boys. I soothe scrapes, calm tempers, embrace and love and love and love and love. As men, one will revere life, one will die too young, one will lead the church, one will go mad. Each one exactly like his father. Simply, I like cured ham, raspberry jam, and enjoy a strong brewed tea. I am a new country unfurled. I will slay the lion, I will be the oak. I own hope, I choose faith. I am at home in the spray and swell of furious weather. Skin split from chapping, seeks no salve. Thank you.
Hi there. My name's Elizabeth. I'm really happy to be here tonight. I love all the women who are on this panel tonight. I really genuinely do. And those poems from Glossolalia are absolutely chilling. Yeah, and congratulations on your new book, Jennica. It's awesome. Yeah. All right, so this reading tonight is called Too True. So I'm going to read some stuff that's too true. It's too true, Liz. I don't want to know. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is called You Know What Readers Like, and it is for my husband, Blake Smith. I can see now that I was once quite feral. Getting older was my education in becoming civilized. Also, being married to you. That was the decade of cleaning our things in the nude so as not to ruin our clothes with all that bleach. We couldn't replace anything. When something broke, it was broken. We were broke. I bought you a bullwhip and some hot sauce and some tiny wooden armadillos and some tropical fish magnets that wiggled when you opened and closed the door to the fridge. You bought me a space heater. Like Peter Quatermain's Mrs. Bailey, I like to think I had a strong sense of what my position was and what was proper. On 2 occasions, I shit myself, once when sick and once when aroused. And here, I'm thinking of Tess. Not the cat we sat, but the fictional girl hanging from the fictional tree. I appreciated it when you reminded me how easily I can become bored. It's true. I do need a challenge. A teenager is like a scarlet runner bean. It will wind round whatever trellis you do or don't provide. Sometimes it is satisfying to make a howling sound that comes straight from the diaphragm. You know what the diaphragm is? Ennui. The educated say, ennui. Your father is a machinist. I know what he does in theory, and you can build a train wreck, though why anyone would want to build a train wreck is unclear to most. I get it. Baby, we are so private. And here I'm thinking of my grandmother in assisted living in Regina, her TV so quiet as to be imperceptible, the ghost in her china. You are the first person I ever heard say the word hubris. Your parents are social democrats. Your mother gave me Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, and then I knew what Howlin' Wolf meant by the killing floor. You took me for sushi. I bought a plastic harmonica in the shape of an ear of corn. The first time you licked my pussy, I was sure. The first time you kissed my mouth, I really wasn't. We did everything backwards. You didn't seem to mind. Often I would come home from my coffee shop job and just sob. After so much violence, it has become radical to be a soft critic, to write poems about horses. I bought some glow-in-the-dark zombie finger puppets and a plastic paparazzi play set and an antique marionette in the shape of an ostrich called My Favorite Pet. I hoped not to suffer from what, in certain circles, is referred to as a wet brain. Yay for Blake is right. God, he's such a good guy, that one. Like you guys really know, right? Okay, this poem is called I Drop Your Names, and it's for Jillian Jerome, who does know me very well, and Jen Farrell. All right, you guys. I drop your names. When I read your poems and see my name there on the third line, balancing like a teacup on the lip of a ledge, and there is Jillian on the 5th and Jennifer on the 6th, I am moved to tell you, please stop putting our names in poems. What do you think it will be like reading this or those years from now when you and I are gone, or all but gone? It's been 10 weeks since we last met. Already your faces are fading from my memory, like the periodic table of elements, or the lyrics to some song I learned while driving the island highway one month. I can't remember. Which is to say, I can recall those things well enough to feel their absence and know what's already gone. Birthday poem, 2012. The birches went a long way back. You couldn't see past them. They were planted in rows. We'd better look out for that bull, I thought. My sister agreed. We could see it stamping one cloven hoof way off in the distance, just a little brown bull, far off. Then it came charging. A bull is a terrible creature. Its horns are terrible. Its eyes are terrible. Its solid flesh steams in winter air. We'd better get behind this tree, I thought. My sister agreed, and the bull got bigger as it came closer until it slammed into us, into our tree, and then that furious thing backed up and started over again. I'll admit I was frightened, but my sister was laughing. The way you might in church, or a particularly earnest high school presentation. It's not her fault. I am my sister, the forest, the tree. I am the bull and the still frozen ground. No sound. Shoulders moving up and down. When I have the body of a man. When I have the body of a man, I have the head of a bull. When I have the head of a bull, Athena springs from my forehead. When Athena springs from my forehead, I tell Athena, cut it out. When I tell Athena, cut it out, she makes a string of paper dolls from my money. When she makes a string of paper dolls from my money, I say, thank you, fold them up and put them in a drawer. When I say thank you, fold them up and put them in a drawer, the dolls figure out a way to get out and use eBay when I'm not home. When the dolls figure out a way to get out and use eBay when I'm not home, I know I've not had enough to drink. When I know I've not had enough to drink, I admire my fortitude. When I admire my fortitude, Athena says, cut it out. When Athena says, cut it out, one should always listen. When one should always listen, I think, don't tell me what to do with my time. When I think, don't tell me what to do with my time, I have the body of a man. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Amber Dawn, in case you forgotten while listening to all this rich poetry. Thank you so much. Whew, I got the shivers. And I also feel like I should read humor now. But I'm going to... I don't know. What? I know. So my book is called How Poetry Saved My Life, which you'll notice is not called How Poetry Augmented My Already Comfortable Middle-Class Lifestyle. And in saying that, there's some tough poems in here. Too True was this great reading for me to be invited to because I feel so often I've heard feedback that my work is too true, it's too revealing, it's too personal, it's too brazen, it's too something. So I'm glad to be here at Too True. It seems like a permission. So I thought about what I should bring to a reading called Too True, and it occurred to me, considering we're here in the V6A, I should bring work that takes place in the downtown east side. But actually, that's not the work that I consider too true at all. Actually, that's very comfortable work for me to talk about. It's not too true. It's just a story like any other story. So I scanned my book again, and I was like, what is actually vulnerable for me? What's too true? What's overly personal? And I noticed that I use the second person a lot in poetry. And I love the second person because it's a little tap-tap on the reader to pay extra attention because I may or may not be addressing you directly. But it's also a bit of a tool for me to distance the work from the I, from the actual self. And the scan proved to be too true. Every time I used you, the second person, it was work that I was quite uncomfortable with and felt that I took a risk. So I am just going to read second person point of view poetry. And the first one is glossy. The reek of pot smoke and fried delivery food, stinking sheep-scented candles, OKY jelly and latex bouquet. The hairspray and weave sheen in your nostrils, the cock stench, the cunt smell. Eventually all this disappears, and you think you're breathing fresh air. The girl who wears only neon-colored swimsuits dumps CoverGirl foundation over her stretch marks childbearing, lace ribbon-like scars boob job, a knife wound on again, off again, boyfriend, and discusses matters of the heart. You know that she is wise beyond any doubt wise, and yes, she is definitely, yes, giving you sound advice. That same girl you will help bear the weight of a blacked-out man. Together bring his sloppy body out the door and into the parking lot, rifle through his pockets before laying him on the hood of his own car. Wear her clothes if she feels like being nice to you, dresses that are nothing more than tiny tubes of shiny fabric, dresses so small your ass is half out, nipples go pop. She teaches you how to levitate 6 inches from the floor. Shin splints, hammer toe, shin splints, tendonitis, neuromas, shin splints, Achilles, ingrown, bunion, callus, corns. Study the Adam's apple, the visceral movement of the many men who say nothing to you. Or they clear their throats. They are not accustomed to this climate, or to standing naked while their eyes adjust to black light. You favor the nervous. Somehow their goosebumps remind you of kissing the back of your hand. To these men, you will give more than what they ask for. If there's any formalists out there, I'm going to read a glossa. The glossa begins with a quote from Irving Layton, which reads, "There are brightest apples in those trees, but until I, fabulist, have spoken, they do not know their significance, or what other legends are hung like garlands." Oral tradition. I offer you this cracked teacup, a potted plant that falls, drunken youth who wrap their cars around lampposts, women break bar stools, bathroom mirrors, jar bones, neighbors go missing. Fire consumes a city block. Fire assumes human form and murders a nation. Fire returns as black rain, and everywhere is a site of damaged past. And everywhere is a site of pending disaster, and everywhere serpents hang, whispering, "There are brightest apples in those trees." And what of the black waters chop in your own mind? That troubled panorama that vilifies shadows of the late afternoon as they quietly unburden the daylight. Even simple bird song threatens to tear holes in the sky, and what then? The world unravels again, and you unravel with it. But this emptiness you've come to know is fertile soil that waits for fireweed and milk thistle. But until you, fabulist, have spoken, no flower grows. Tell them to be brave and new, little trailblazers, little champions of life. I'll look again at that tear in the sky. There dangles a slender foot or leg or twisting spine. A hand reaches from the rift. Call to her. The fall's only temporary. She will fall like you fell, and she too will survive, but does not know her significance until you tell her story. Let her fall to her first moment, or fashion herself from the fables of those who came before. Let her create ancestors from clay and blood. Let them unbury themselves, old bones and stone carvings. Listen. Under the din of day to day, what bright and flawless music. Open your eyes. What beauty is veiled in the dust. Speak. What remembrance, what narration, and what other legends are hung like garland. All right, this is where it gets real. It's a love poem. God, that's uncomfortable. It's called Sweet Home. It's dedicated to my wife. 4 summers together, and you are still surprised by her hand on the nape of your neck. You met during an uncommonly beautiful May. Vancouver's persistent cloud cover was driven off by warm El Nino winds, leaving the view postcard perfect. Snow-capped mountains, sun-beaded sea, and so many azaleas and hawthorn flowers, the city seemed to be blushing. Your first date found you swimming in your underwear off a glacial scour, the sloping shoreline of Horseshoe Bay. It's not normally like this. It's normally too cold, you told her as you slipped into the black water. You didn't know she was afraid of the ocean. She didn't know that you are afraid of Christmas, that you never turn your back to the only exit in the room, how sometimes you don't leave your house for days, about your fear of being touched on the back of your neck or periodically being touched at all, that you navigate this world like trouble is around every corner, that you often worry that being tough is the closest you'll get to being happy. Why is it you've written so much about desire and very little about love? Don't blame it on abstraction. You've mustered up a million examples of actualizing other emotions, and by now you are well aware that poetry can make even the highest concepts concrete. No, you don't write about love for the very same reason you refuse to learn to roller skate. You dislike the idea of introducing anything that requires hurting yourself repeatedly before you get good at it. You are reluctant to fall on your ass. But hasn't she left a fine filigree of welts on your ass? Did you not ask to wear her teeth marks like ornaments around your neck? Have you not limped through your days appreciatively sore from her fucking you? This newfound willingness you chalked up to love at first sight. What is closer to the bone is that right away you sensed her love was forceful enough to turn you inside out, and you wanted to have the contents of your heart shaken. You wanted to be emptied so that gradually you could replace old persistent fears with her love. In the room you've made together, there's an east-facing window. Through this window you've watched the moon disappear and return 100 times before you understood the message. There is an artistry to self-perpetuation. The moon's had a lot of practice. You, however, are still tenderfoot when it comes to beginning again. Now you stand in this world as someone who is completely loved. From this point of view, who knows what poetry is yet to come? Thank you.
Thank you. What gorgeous readings. So we're going to have a short break. Short as in 7 minutes. I'm timing it. And then please join us for a riveting conversation between these four women. Thank you. Okay, thank you everyone for once again for coming and being such an attentive audience. And thank you for taking your seats so that we can start our conversation. I just wanted to begin by thanking Marita for asking me to join this reading and asking me to moderate this discussion. And when she asked me to do this, I asked her if we could do a bit of a tradesy and if it would be okay to make this a fundraiser for Canadian women in the literary arts. I founded Quila 2 years ago, and we advocate for our sort of raison d'etre is that we advocate for racial and gender equity in the literary arts. And we do that in a few ways. By far, the best thing to happen to Quila in the past 2 months was David Gilmour. He was, a fine illustration for why we exist. So we do three things mainly. We do an annual count of book reviews by gender. We're talking about, within our research network at UBC, we're talking about how to account for race. Doing a count by race is a complicated thing because of the history of racial categories. And so we're hosting a panel to talk about racial equity in the literary arts up at UBC. The second thing that we do, the other major program is the Critic in Residence program. And so because we understand that one of the barriers for women to do critical work is material, we pay a critic $3,000 to write book reviews or a longer critical work. And last year, our first Critic in Residence was the Montreal poet and philosopher Sue Sinclair. She did all kinds of great community work and critical work. And then we just closed our applications for this year's Critic in Residence. And finally, we have a website at www.cwila.com. So if you haven't checked us out, please do. And there's a donation box in the back. And I'd like to introduce our executive director, Sheila Giffen. She's right over there. And I do want to say it feels really quite amazing to introduce Sheila as our executive director. Quila started on a budget of $0. We counted 3,000 book reviews in 14 Canadian literary journals with a budget of zip. So we've come a long way in 2 years, and we've relied on public generosity. So I want to begin, actually, by asking a question that I hadn't planned to ask. One of the things I'm very privileged to be able to do during the day, one of my 3 day jobs, I teach as a sessional lecturer up at UBC, and I teach literature and poetry in particular. And when I'm teaching, I'm very conscious of the literary history in poetry, and in particular, I teach a lot of 20th century work in Canada and the US. And I'm often very aware that there's a lot of male coteries. So if I think about the Confederation poets, about the Montreal modernists, the Beats, the New York School, so lots of guys working in coteries and in groups and supporting each other's work. So my first question is about friendship. And so in your books, you reference each other, either in your poems. I noticed this, having read all your work. You reference each other either in your poems or in the notes at the back. And so I wanted to ask you, to what extent do your friendships with other women feed your work as writers? How important are these friendships to your work as writers?
Super important.
Yeah. And I guess my question is how? How do other women who write play roles in your process as writers, in your identities, in what you produce and don't produce, in what you write and don't write, in your careers, in your public work, in your private work, the whole shebang, really?
Me. A lot. When I first graduated from UBC, I had a BFA in creative writing and English from UBC. And when I graduated, I was so lucky. I had all these amazing women that I went to school with. And then we had a writing group. And we got together, and in that writing group, there was Amber Dawn, Janie Lou, Jada Pape, me, Beth Ann Grabham, who am I forgetting? Doretta Lau. Oh my God, Doretta Lau. And so we would get together, and maybe even once a month. That's a lot, right? For writers who are just completely scattered. Once a month we would get together, we would share our poems, we would talk about them, and it was so great, especially at that time when we were young and just didn't even know that you could be a writer, really. And so that was really, really important for me to feel like, and we really felt like we were a sisterhood, because we were, that was a big deal to us that we stuck with each other. And, all these years later, it's at least 10, if not long, it's been a long time. We're still all in touch. I know what all those women are up to. There's amazing books coming out. It's just amazing, Jennica Harper here inspires me all the time. I even wrote fan fiction for a show that doesn't even exist for her because, she excites me so much.
I thought of it as pitching, but fan fiction is okay too.
I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. And then, and Marita Dachsel, I feel so supported by her. She made that amazing initiation trilogy that just literally blew my socks off with the Electric Company. I don't know how much more lucky we could get. Gillian Jerome, inspires me. It's unbelievable.
Oh, stop. Come on.
No, it's true. It's true. These women doing all this work and not getting, a lot of recognition for it. I say, we have to support each other, and I feel so supported, and it's one of the reasons why I keep writing, because if I didn't feel like I had that sisterhood with me, I don't think I would do what I do. I don't think I would be strong enough to do what you do, because, a writing life is not an easy life. And for a poet, it's like, come on. Who even, it's astonishingly difficult to keep your chin up. And so, it's an easy life when you have these type of women around you, and inspiring me there.
I can add to that a little bit.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Clap for Liz. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like Liz, I think at first, graduating from school, it was very similar. Several of us got together, and it was about continuing to write. It was about continuing to grow as writers and push each other. And Marita and I, Marita Dachsel and I, are very close, and also close with Leisha Rosnow. And, we were in a part of a bigger group for a while, and it kind of, it sort of whittled over time. And then we were all living in different cities and actually had a workshop via blog, like a private blog that we would post a poem, on a schedule and then give feedback in the comments and things like that. But for me, I think over time, that is still incredibly valuable to me, reading each other's work and getting that feedback. But in a way, the other parts of life and about being a person and doing this, and about, is it okay to feel this way about this? Should I even write this one? Encouraging each other to write the ones that we didn't, on a lark, I had written a poem about Sally Draper, and Marita said, you need to follow this. I want to see all these poems, and I want to see the poem about Sally Draper's first abortion. And there is, in fact, a poem in Wood that is about Sally Draper's first abortion, and her first.
Yes.
It's and so that's sort of one example. But other examples of I'm feeling very weird about this. I'm feeling uncomfortable about publishing this. Should I put this out there? Should I be feeling jealous of this person? I suddenly have this horrible feeling. I don't want to feel this way. Let's talk it out. And, and sometimes manicures are involved and sometimes they're not. But it's sort of like the doing it together and talking through that stuff that you feel maybe kind of a little, I don't know, self-conscious about even thinking about or talking about. That is so valuable to me.
Yes. Everything she just said.
I think I have a privilege that I've always lived in a bubble of, like a womb of women. I was raised by a single mother who was very vivacious and just very big in her womanhood. And she was an artist, a poor artist, and we would often go to galleries, and that was my task, find the other women artists, like find your Louise Nevelsons, and go find your Georgia O'Keeffes, find them, and report back to me. And we always had to watch documentaries that were like, women during the war years, which was good. It was great. I mean, it was difficult at times, but it was great. And then, I came out as a lesbian fairly young, and so I was just all women all the time. And I found myself in very women-centric occupations, from prostitution, which is this amazing camaraderie of women, to staffing women's centers and anti-violence centers. And there's a lot of women in poetry, that's for sure. It seemed like a natural place for me to go. I mean, a radical feminist lesbian, just adding the word poet to that, it just seems like what those things go together, So and I read frequently with women. I'm often invited to panels such as this where I'm appearing with other women. In fact, when I see a review by a male journalist or critic, I'm always like, that's a surprise. They're great reviews. I don't regard them with any higher or lower esteem than any other review I receive, but it does surprise me because I'm in the womb of woman.
Thank you, everyone, for your articulate responses. I want to switch gears a little bit and ask Jennica. So your book, Wood, you actually read from Papa Hotel, in which you reimagine your father as a series of talented men in film who have particularly masculine personas. So Jack Nicholson, Robert Redford, Kevin Costner, Roman Polanski, Peter Falk, and Steve McQueen. And in the notes at the end of your book, you say that the poems are for your dad, Pete, who is a mystery and a man. So what do these men in film mean to you? And why did you reimagine your father through the lens of their personas?
See, this is why I was scared. I knew it would be hard questions. That's a great question. So I guess, it is so difficult to approach some material head on. I mean, some of us use the second person. I certainly use the second person. But this was sort of a way to try and get at some memories and stories and feelings that are very complicated and bundled up, all sort of in a knot for me. And it was sort of a filter and a way in, was how I was thinking about it. And I do still find him a very mysterious man. I don't know him, I don't know my father particularly well. And so it was kind of, for me, this sort of cubist look at, different facets of the things I remember of who he is, the things I remember from when he was in the household, and then sort of the imagined versions of those. And I don't know if I could even tell you what is exactly true in those in those except that the feeling is true. You know, that it. I think the essence is true. And in terms of those particular men and sort of why those men.
Yeah.
I was mentioning this to you too. That in fact, the Papa Hotel was a longer piece. It was maybe 12 or 13 poems, and this is in wood is sort of the pared down version. So there were others. You know, there was JFK and there was Warhol, and they kind of went to other places, but it gets tiresome. Nobody really wants to read 13 poems in a row that are, you know, like mad at dad, I don't think. So, but in terms of those men, there's actually something for me physical as a resemblance. Like when I think of him in different ways, I think there's a little bit of, he looks a little like this person and this person, this person. And then definitely, there, you know, these are particular characters, like a particular Kevin Costner character. There's an idea of that man, and I'm trying to kind of, I think, match this man to that man and sort of see, does this fit? Does this fit? Does this fit? So they're, sort of exploring these particular masculine traits and trying to make it work and put the pieces of the puzzle together, even though they will never come together into one coherent whole.
So you mentioned anger in the poems, but were you conscious that there's a particular kind of eros in the poems?
Is there?
Well, you talk about, for instance, Kevin Costner's sexuality, and the passage on Peter Falk is there's a tension there. There's a kind of tension there, and
I actually felt it when I read the Jack Nicholson one, even that I want the waitresses to be
and I wondered
hot.
if that helped you to fill in the gap or the absence.
Wow, that's a really, really interesting and difficult question. Maybe, yeah. I mean, I think there is, you know, it is so fundamental to sort of who I am to think about this guy that I don't really know that well. Yeah. And I think because there's heat there, and the heat is sort of fear and uncertainty and not knowing. Yeah. And so it makes sense that part of that heat is like actual heat. that sort of fits to me, that there's an intensity there and they're are intense that they are kind of coming together in that way. Yeah. Very interesting.
Thank you. Amber Dawn. Hi.
I already need therapy after this reading, so maybe a less challenging question for me.
Okay, I will try. So you write candidly in How Poetry Saved My Life about your life as a sex worker, a student, and writer in Vancouver. And at the same time that you're writing memoir and poetry, you're subverting the salient features of the genre. And you do that in a few ways. You stop and you challenge the reader. You interrogate romantic stereotypes about sex workers. You refuse to play the victim. You address difficult issues of class, queerness, and sexuality. You write towards the end of the book, the story you're reading right now is not about how I exited the sex trade. It's the one I recount to remind myself that I survived and that the worth of my life can be paid back with my truth and my stories. So your book strikes me as such a personal but also deeply political book. And so that's what I want to ask you about. In the section to the butches I loved between 1995 and 2005, which is gorgeous and deeply moving, you say that climbing the class ladder was terrifying. How often are you asked about what you've written about class and sex work?
How often am I asked about it?
Yeah.
How
like
often
when
every single time I have a microphone.
Yeah.
For the last decade, there's almost no other question that I can guarantee will be asked of me. But I think maybe what is an interesting thing to do from here is what does that question, which comes up again and again and again, do to me as a writer, and how does it impact my relationship with an audience, if that's
that's
the place to go.
Yeah.
So in between the years 2003 and 2007, I decided that I wanted to start performing some of my early memoir work on stage. And Vancouver didn't feel like the place where I could do that. But I was fortunate enough to find a touring show that mostly did academic and theater venues. And it was called the Sex Workers Art Show. So it was the perfect platform for me to get on stage. And I did some stand-up comedy and some burlesque, and I read stories. And often there would be Q&As afterwards where all sorts of questions would be asked. It would be myself and 9 other performers, so there's always 10 that went. And one of the questions, now mind you, this is the United States, and we even went to places like Huntsville, Alabama, and Denton, Texas, and stuff like that. So one of the questions that were asked was, were we pacifists? Were we anti-war? Is that how we were politicized as well, being pro-sex worker or sex worker rights? Which we all answered yes. We are pacifists. We're not war-mongering sort of types. And then the next question that followed was, now that the anti-war movement has won the endorsement of prostitutes, they will be unstoppable. Can you teach the Democratic Party how to be whores for the Al-Qaeda? And first of all, I was like, I'm Canadian. I don't want any part of this. But I realized that it can't just show up somewhere and say, I'm a sex worker, without people attaching momentous and preposterous things to your identity. You can't do it. And yeah, it's political. This is my political credo, is that if I can dispel some of that, if maybe the next time some scrappy artists get together and they decide they want to do a sex workers art show tour, hopefully no one will ask them about being whores to the Al-Qaeda. It's just a dream. I like to be an optimist.
It's a nice dream.
So I often will do things to engage the reader, to try to show them that they are human and I am human, that they are living in this sort of, tricky shit show of a world, and so am I. We're all related through the way that we don't get seen to the complexity of our self. If anyone else got up here and read a portion of their memoir, that's not a holistic view of who any of us are. It's not a holistic view. So I just try to go wide with fielding questions like this. Yeah. I try to direct questions back at the audience, like what poem could you read that would definitively say who you are? Well, you can't. No poem will be written like that. You just have to keep writing, keep speaking, keep telling your stories. Somewhere people will relate, or they will ask you about the Al-Qaeda. You don't know what will happen.
So you said when you were reading that before you, as you were sort of introducing your reading, that people say to you often that your work is too true, it's too this, it's too that. And I was so aware when I was reading your book of how consistently you challenge middle-class pretensions in the book. Mm-hmm. And I just loved it. And so, but it's an interesting and complex thing. And I guess I want to know, have people asked you to be a kind of spokesperson for the sex trade, for your class position, and what's that like, and how have you dealt with that?
Oh, I'm honored. I mean, my next appearance after this is on December 2nd. It's a human rights conference that's put on by BC Nurses Union, and I'm asked specifically as a voice to sex work, survivorship, poverty. Downtown East Side comes up, although I don't really feel like I represent the downtown East Side anymore, but the V6A is still my neighborhood. I'm still here. Yeah. it's great. Why wouldn't it be wonderful? It's an opportunity. People want to talk about these issues.
Yeah.
We don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
No one offers you a way to talk about growing up in poverty. No one offers you a way to say, you know, I survived sexual abuse as a child. We're not taught how to talk about it. We're only taught to be afraid. And, you know, I also grew up sort of, like, I cut my teeth on, like, AIDS activism. So silence equals death. That's where I come from. You know, I'll always do this work. It's not tiring. It's an opportunity. I'm grateful to do it.
Thank you. I want to ask, Liz, I have a question for you. Hi. So in the description of this event, the question is posed, is it possible to be too true? And so, Liz, I want to begin by asking you this question. You write about elements of your life in the hottest summer in recorded history, but you do so formally, just as you did in Home of Sudden Service, where you wrote sonnets, villanelles, a glossa. And in I Don't Feel So Good, you use the roll of the dice to choose passages from a decade of your journals?
Longer, 86 to 2012.
More than a decade. And so while the material is really personal, it's nevertheless mediated by form. So how is form a kind of shield for the autobiographical self in your work? And would you say that you write more formally because you write so personally? Okay, let's start with the first one. How is form a kind of shield for the autobiographical self in your poems?
Okay, that's a great question. These are great. Wow. Okay, so I love to write formal poetry because I find there's a lot of freedom in the act of doing that. I find that writing something that has a very strict form means that I don't know where it's going. You know, when you have total freedom to do a thing, you can take control of it quite a lot, right? Like Liz Bachinsky can get into the driver's seat, but with a formal thing, the only thing that you can expect is that, you know, line 6 has to rhyme with line 9, and or, you know, there's a certain pattern that needs to repeat, or there's a particular rule, like a roll of the dice, that's going to tell you where to go. And that's the only thing I know. So you kind of have to submit yourself to that. So it lends itself to autobiography, or in the way that I don't know what part of my synaptic activity is going to be illuminated by the act of bending it into the shape of the poem, right? It's like pouring water into a glass. You're like, I know what shape it's going to go into, but I don't know what the molecules are going to do inside the glass. I don't know. It's weird. You know, I guess the most obvious book that happens in is I Don't Feel So Good, which is a book that I did for Book Thug last year. It's just a small little thing, and I had 25 years worth of journals, and I just took dice and I arranged them around me in a circle. I had piles of books all around me, and then I threw dice, and the dice told me which pile to go to, which, you know, part of the pile, which book, which section, which page, and then finally which sentence, and then wherever my finger fell, that's what I had to put in the book. And so the rule was, you have to do it in the order it appears, and you have to write it down. And that's what I did. And it, you know, in terms of shielding, well, it shields perfectly, because you never feel personally, this is how I feel when I'm reading it. I don't ever feel like I'm revealing too much. It is too fragmented for it to be that revealing. And it's also funny, like the juxtaposition of how things fell.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have done that Like if I had been in the driver's seat, being like, no, I will pick this part of this book, it just wouldn't have happened that way. So it's a perfect shield. And also, when you're writing formal stuff, there is a certain virtuosity that comes along with writing something that is technically at least proficient, right? A reader will look at it and say, oh, well, isn't that well made? Good for you. Right? Mm-hmm. And so you can trick people. And that's what County Cullen did, right, in the 1920s and 30s, when he was writing poetry for the Harlem Renaissance, and he wanted to write poems about his life as an African American living in New York in the 20s. That's exactly what he did. You know, he wrote sonnets because he could trick people into seeing the virtuosity, and they would not notice the fact that he was writing about his life as a black man in New York in the 20s. Mm-hmm. Right? So, you know, it has a lot to do with class, actually. I think, you know, there's something that will appeal to a wide range of readers, right? Technical precision, beauty of the form will appeal to many types of people in all types of situations. So you can just be tricky, and you can write about, you know, whatever you want, so long as it's very beautiful.
Marita, I wanted to ask you, so you wrote this incredible book, this astonishing book, this oh, can you hear me? This deeply political book about the 34 polygamous wives of Joseph Smith. And you explored mid-19th century Mormon America. Mm-hmm. To what extent are the wives' stories your stories?
Well, I am not part of a polygamous marriage. I know. Yet. But my first book has this sort of, it feels like a first book. It's very much stories, coming of age stories from small towns, and a lot. I have had friends come up to me and be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that happened to you," and it's like, well, it's actually all like most of it is not true. I made it up. But because it was in a confessional manner, they thought it was true. And I guess everything has an essence of truth. But I wanted, for my second book, I was like, I want to get away from that. And so I had this idea, I'll write from, I won't write from my voice anymore. But then I realized about halfway through the process that I was writing really personal poems, but it was sort of gussied up so it looked like I was talking about these, women from 1840s Mormon America. So there is a lot of me in those poems. Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if I want to say any more than that.
Okay. And so I wanted to ask you, the second part of my question is, what kind of, so you researched so much. I mean, reading the back of the book is quite something, because you read a whole lot in the writing of this book. What kinds of questions did you ask yourself as a writer about the complications, the complexities of speaking for others?
Yeah.
Oh, really? We're just appreciating the question.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a hard one. I really struggled with that because, appropriation is a really big and important issue in art. And I still struggle with it because on one hand, I feel like I have no right to have used these women's names. These are all real women. Many of these women have huge progeny. Like there's hundreds and hundreds of people in North America who are descendant from these women, and I'm putting, sometimes their stories are true, biographically true, but sometimes they're completely made up, and I justify it, I rationalize it by saying that the essence of the poem is true, and that it's true to me, and that the emotions and the struggles within those poems are universal and personal. And I just hope I don't get in trouble from one of the progeny, but yeah, I think that it's another type of form. It was a constraint to be able to. I never wanted to write poems about motherhood. I've got 3 kids. I think there's a lot of great poems about motherhood, but yet I ended up writing these poems. Some of them about motherhood, a lot about sex and the dynamics in a marriage and between friends and sisters and
sister wives.
Yes, that I think are true, and it was the only way I could actually dig deep enough into those subject matter is to give myself that constraint of saying, "Oh, it's not about me." Ha, ha, ha.
So you mentioned sex. You all write about sex and sexuality to varying degrees in your work. And so to varying degrees, the sex in your books is hot, is transgressive, and figures in presenting women as full, interesting subjects. And all of you, the way you write about sex demonstrates the tension between being a subject and an object, which I think is an irreconcilable part of being female. So, I just want to ask you about... You asked me to do this. I was invited to come and ask questions. I read all your books and thought about them.
This is
give
fantastic.
me a dirty look. Bullshit. So, can you speak to the personal and sort of political complexities involved in writing about sex and sexuality? And in particular, that's sort of what I just said. That stuff, the question.
I'll start, but yeah, that's a really great question. And oh man, sex is hard. It is all those things. It's so complex. It's desire. It's wanting to be wanted. It's wanting. It's being the object. It's being the subject. It's being in control. It's being taken advantage of. It's all of those things, and who knows what makes you hot, and who knows. It changes all the time too, and I think, okay, I don't know, I'm starting to ramble, which is a danger with me, that it's really important as women to put it out there. For centuries, women have been the object of poems, of art, of all these things, and it's time for us to not necessarily, turn the mirror, turn the lens, but to own it and be like, okay, well, yeah, I'm desirous. Yeah, you want, we're sexual beings and you want a piece of it, but I'm going to talk about what it's like from my side of it, and it doesn't have to be a reflection, it doesn't have to be a reaction, but we have to dig deep. And I think it's important for women as feminists and, putting the groundwork for the next generation, so maybe things won't be as fucked up as they are now.
That was a great answer.
That's a great answer.
And the question was full of compliments to all of us, and thank you for the question. I really agree with everything Marita says, and I don't think, personally, I don't think I have thought of any writing about sex as something that was like important to do. It's sort of more looking at it and thinking about it after the fact that I realize I completely agree with Marita that we need to do that, and I love when I'm reading a book and get into that from someone else's perspective. But my second book was largely one narrative. There was a story of friendship and desire as a teenage girl, and it was really difficult to write, really difficult to figure out the line between what I thought was okay to put out there. It was because I was so uncomfortable. It felt like a thing I had to do. Like it was all those things together, and there's a narrative at the heart of it that is true, that is about a friendship that was real, and many of the events in the story are real, and figuring out how to do that respectfully without necessarily exposing anything for another human being. Similar to some, I'm sure we've all had these concerns, not wanting to infringe on someone else's life rights and the right to not be written about necessarily. But that, I think, is the thing, is it feels like it's hard and it's uncomfortable and you have to go there, and if it's ugly and if it's funny and if it's real, then it's putting all of these different perspectives out there that have not always been out there. And so, yeah, I think it's really important, and I think we should all be proud that we do it. So,
Jillian, I'll answer quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It is really good.
You're very
I
welcome.
have a very expressive face. Sorry. I just wanted to say that, I've been writing, sex has been in my books since I ever started writing. And it was not something that I started doing because I thought, I'm going to write about sex now. It arose very organically from my writing. Just like life, right? Like it's part of our lives. So to be honest, it's not something that I actually really thought about a lot. It did not occur to me that anything that I was writing would be shocking or unusual or anything. So I was really surprised when, when audiences were, shocked. I remember I read in Australia once, and I have a whole series of poems about teenage girls too, and it was just silent. Canadians laugh, Canadians are like, it's hilarious. You're talking about blowjob, haha, it's so funny, right? And Australians were like having none of it. So it's just what a privilege to be able to come from that perspective where, I can write about whatever I want to write about. I'll do what I want. And there are people in the world who don't have that opportunity, So I actually take it pretty seriously now, I think about that privilege, and I just do it. I just keep on doing it. Feels good.
I grew up in a house with a big macrame vulva on the wall. It just doesn't occur to me that we shouldn't be talking about or writing about our bodies and sex. It really has never occurred to me. I don't do it as much anymore, but I used to do a lot of sort of live installation art, whack kind of 1970s feminist art. And I did this one piece where I was in this red pool with floating candles and flower petals and all this sort of altar-like tchotchkes all around me, and I was a saint. I was Santa Perversia, and people could come and pray to me to be absolved of shame, so they weren't going to be ashamed. They wanted their shame to be absolved, and I thought this was hilarious. yes, in a pool. People could light a candle and give it to me. They could tell me some of their secrets. If they wanted a foot bath, I could have a little foot bath with them. And one of the third participants that I got just clutched onto me and wept and told me about feeling compulsion when it came to sex, feeling very ashamed, feeling trapped in his desire. And I honestly wasn't prepared to do such a performance because I had no idea that someone was actually going to take it to a very deep literal place and be so burdened by that kind of shame around sex. Like, it just didn't occur to me that not everyone grows up with a macrame vulva on their wall. And I have the same response when people hone in on some of the sexual content of my work. Like, it's just life. It's just part of life. And God, I'm so glad that I don't feel ashamed, because what would I write about? I don't even know. I'd have nothing. I'd have nothing if I felt hung up about sex.
The macrame vulva is amazing. I did not grow up with a macrame vulva in our living room. Quite the opposite. So, amazing. Yeah, amazing. And by the way, your writing about sex is, so fucking great.
So I also did, safer sex education with youth, and part of safer sex education is, of course, being able to communicate around sex, because when you don't know what to ask for or when to draw a boundary, then unsafe sex, both in a sort of a physical, STI sense, and just emotional unsafe sex might happen. So we would do things like pin a sexual act to each other's back. It's kind of that game where you have to guess what celebrity you are, and the person doesn't know what celebrity is on their back. But it would be rim job, and you had to go talk to the person about the rim job, but not say rim job, and it was great. It was a great activity for the teenagers to play, and they walked away with some really eloquent ways to talk about what they wanted and what they didn't want. And, no more did they have to say, I want to blank your blank. They had some words. I felt proud. And, and if you just try to write a sex scene, and even if you're not going to ever publish it, it's a really great exercise for a writer to be able to do.
Well, for anyone.
For anyone to be able to do. Yeah, just even if you're not even... Go home and practice with each other. And then my wife and I also do this thing where we say no to each other to get used to the idea that people will reject us. So she'll be like, Amradon, can I kiss you? And I say no. And then I'll say, CJ, I would really like you to take your top off. She says no. We're always playing these little games where we get to talk about desire and sex and boundaries. And yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So many games. Go on the internet. You'll find so many games that talk about sex.
Oh, boy. This is my last question. You'll all be very glad to know. So this week in Rabble, Jessica Rose wrote an article, and in it she said that 2013 is not only the year of the short story, but also the year of the Canadian female writer in mainstream literature. And she went on to comment on the past couple of months in CanLit, which began with the Canadian novelist David Gilmour telling Emily Keeler at Hazlitt that he doesn't teach women writers or Chinese writers, but prefers to teach books written by heterosexual white men. A month later, Alice Munro won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Canadian-born Eleanor Catton won the Man Booker Prize for her novel The Luminaries. And Lynn Cody won the Giller for Hellgoing, which has led a few of us to declare that Canadian women writers are kicking ass. One of the points that Quila has made repeatedly is that more attention needs to be paid to more ass kickers, meaning that not all talented women and genderqueer writers in CanLit are getting the same kinds of attention across the board. And that public critical attention itself, as measured by book reviews, by publications in anthologies, by inclusion on course syllabi, on awards lists, prize lists, reading lists, is mediated heavily by class, gender, race, and sexuality. So in our work, we've hoped to shift the conversation, but we know that there's tons more work to do, and that the beliefs of people like Gilmore aren't, in fact, as uncommon as we'd like to think. So what are your thoughts on what's been happening in the public discourse on Canadian literature since Gilmore's comments, and how do each of you think the conversation needs to shift? And it's my final question, I swear. Okay. I'm done after this.
I'm going to just start. Well, one thing that I'm not going to totally answer your question, but I'm going to...
Half would be fine.
Okay. One thing that we can notice about all those really fantastic women that have been lauded recently is that they're all white. And I think that's a really big issue.
There's a salient feature that we all have in common on this panel.
I know.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. And that's something that when the David, I'm sorry. Look how much wine I've had and it's already
David
gone.
Dillmore, yes. He's a bit of a David Dillmore.
When this thing blew up, when it first happened, I was really enjoying it because I was like, oh my God, what an idiot. Like, he actually, he thinks it's okay. And of course he does because of all that privilege and la la la. And I was like, ah ha ha. And I was on Twitter retweeting everyone and cackling and really enjoying the shitstorm. And then but this was happening the day of my class that I teach over at UVic. And then I was prepping my class between retweeting and I was like, oh, huh. I went back. So I looked at what I was teaching, and it was clear I heavily privileged white women. And yay for women, but it was wow, I don't have a lot of writers of color on my syllabus. And it was just it was kind of like a kick in the gut. And then I was like, oh, maybe
You wrote a blog post about it, and it was one of my favorite things to come out of it, because I really think that if Gilmore gave us anything, he gave us a moment to take stock.
And I think that maybe we haven't been. I think that's what I'd like to see is more people taking stock. I think it's really easy to laugh, and it's fun, but to actually step aside and see what our privileges are, what our biases are. And obviously, I was the fortunate one to be able to handpick this table, and I love all of you. You're all white. We're all within a couple years age too, right? We're all born with a very short time of each other too, and sorry.
I think what you're trying to say is it's a particular bias that we
all have biases. Yeah. We all have biases, and I think that's something that we all have to be really aware of and work through. And maybe I'll stop because I'm rambling now, but yeah.
I'm going to have kind of a strange response to this one too. Having been participated in and been conscious of prize culture for the past, however, 15 years, I would like to say that the chances of 3 women winning all those prizes in the same year is pretty rare. The stars really had to align for that to happen. It's not there was a concerted effort by all the jurors and people who put, publishers and everything that came together to put those books forward to make sure that women won that award, and now it's our time and it's all right. I don't think that's actually true. I think that's I think it really is. There is a tremendous amount of chance involved in prize culture, right? And I think it's great that women are kicking ass. Those are wonderful writers and amazing books, absolutely. But I'm not convinced that gender has anything to do with it. I think it has everything to do with the quality of the work and the type of books that were put forward, and those really just the confluence of events that brought those books to the fore. So I don't know if that's not a particularly insightful social critique, but there's so much left to chance.
I'm going to keep it brief. Okay. This is a difficult one for me a little bit because I am not working in a university environment right now. I'm not working in an academic environment at all. I am not thinking about syllabi other than dreaming of being on one day. Required reading for somebody. But I work in film and TV, and so it's the same conversation that I'm having there. And it's the same, it's a very similar conversation. It has its own complexities, of course, but, I'm working as a writer and producer in in television, and that is where a lot of my emotional energy in terms of trying to make things happen and trying to bring more women into that world with me is where a lot of my attention is being paid. And so when I am reading work, poetry, books, like novels, I'm quite happy that I am kind of blind to, I'm not blind in the sense that I don't have biases, but I love that there are, that I'm looking at what sounds good and what people are recommending to me, and I'm not as conscious of it, while of course recognizing things are not, we're not there, we're not done, but it's just interesting to me that I am so conscious of it in this other realm that I'm working in. So, I think we have a responsibility to do everything that we can do. You are obviously, leading the charge with Quila.
Many other people, yeah.
With many other people,
yeah.
and we're doing what we do in different ways.
Yeah,
but
everyone is doing.
So that's not exactly a great answer to the question, except that it's sort of my parallel answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a really big question, especially in light of what Marita brought up in terms of the biases that we arrive with and how we practice allyship and think about representation in what we do. There perhaps is no recipe for this, but there are certainly many people who have worked on this idea of representation, inclusivity. I can only speak for myself. In my syllabi, I have one book in my speculative fiction class. It's a woman of color who wrote Octavia Butler's collection of short stories. And in my poetry package, as it's called, for sure, absolutely. And for sure, at least 2 First Nations writers. We are in Canada. Whose land are we on? It didn't come easy. It wasn't the poets I connected with first. When I had a writing series, at least 2 women of color appear on that stage, or I don't run the series. I wait. And it wasn't always effortless to reach out to artists who weren't necessarily in my inner circle and say, "Hi, I'm this scrappy white girl. Do you want to come on down and read for less money than you deserve at this performance where you may or may not feel tokenized, and I can't guarantee that it's your audience or that you'll be safe." But that's realistically what I had to offer. And there were some magical moments. There was some great learning. We're at this point now in our literary careers where we have a platform. Who are we going to share it with?
Yeah, great question. Amber Dawn, what you said about relationships is, I think, so key, right? Like the only way you change things, I mean, we're talking about people and we're talking about relationships. And I think, we all have to take risks to extend ourselves and build relationships with others, in all kinds of ways.
And I've seen everyone here do it in some way or another. Like I'm starting to go through memory lane, and I'm like, we've had all of those moments where I think we've all been like, hey, I'm this scrappy white girl who really likes poems, and we're doing really different work than this artist that we're trying to engage, but how can we engage them, And sometimes it works out beautifully and you make great connections, and then other times, cultural differences or other differences create more work to do.
Yeah.
But it's good work to be doing.
Yeah. It's good work to be doing, and it's difficult work to be doing, and it's under-resourced work to be doing. Yeah. So does anyone else have questions for our writers? I think we are at about time.
Gina.
I think we're good. We asked a lot of questions. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. And where can we buy one?
Voice.
I don't think they're making macrame vulvas anymore. She made it.
You have to make it.
I can macrame you a vulva, actually. You just need a giant wooden bead to be the clitoris.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to the reading and sharing in this lovely event. And please do buy books. Please do consider making a donation to Canadian Women in Literary Arts. And once again, thank you to Marita for asking us all to read. Mm-hmm. Thank you for asking me to moderate. Thank you to Joe Hall and everyone else at SFU for hosting us. Mm-hmm. And thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.